King Ahab Part 2, War is what it says. And I'm going to read for us some of 1 Kings chapter 20. I think I won't read the whole chapter. It's a little bit longer, but I'll probably read about half the chapter. So 1 Kings, the 20th chapter, and I'm going to read. You can follow along or just listen. Now Ben-hadad, king of Aram, gathered all his army, and there were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots. And he went up and besieged Samaria and fought against it. Then he sent messengers to the city to Ahab, king of Israel, and said to him, Thus says Ben-hadad, Your silver and your gold are mine. Your most beautiful wives and children are also mine. The king of Israel replied, It is according to your word, my lord, O king. I am yours and all that I have. Then the messengers returned and said, Thus says Ben-hadad, Surely I sent to you, saying, You shall give me your silver and your gold and your wives and your children. But about this time tomorrow I will send my servants to you, and they will search your house and the houses of your servants, and whatever is desirable in your eyes they will take in their hand and carry away. Then the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, Please observe and see how this man is looking for trouble. For he sent to me for my wives and my children and my silver and my gold, and I did not refuse him. All the elders and all the people said to him, Do not listen or consent. So he said to the messengers of Ben-hadad, Tell my lord the king, all that you sent for to your servant at the first I will do, but this thing I cannot do. And the messengers departed and brought him word again. Ben-hadad sent him and said, May the gods do so to me and more also, if the dust of Samaria will suffice for handfuls for all the people who follow me. Then the king of Israel replied, Tell him, let not him who girds on his armor boast like him who takes it off. When Ben-hadad heard this message, as he was drinking with the kings in the temporary shelters, he said to his servants, Station yourselves. So they stationed themselves against the city. Now behold, a prophet approached Ahab, king of Israel, and said, Thus says the Lord, Have you seen all this great multitude? Behold, I will deliver them into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord. Ahab said, By whom? So he said, Thus says the Lord, By the young men of the rulers of the provinces. Then he said, Who shall begin the battle? And he answered, You. Then he mustered the young men of the rulers of the provinces, and there were 232. And after them he mustered all the people, even all the sons of Israel, 7,000. They went out at noon, while Ben-hadad was drinking himself drunk in the temporary shelters with the 32 kings who helped him. The young men of the rulers of the provinces went out first, and Ben-hadad sent out, and they told him, saying, Men have come out from Samaria. Then he said, If they have come out for peace, take them alive, or if they have come out for war, take them alive. So these went out from the city, the young men of the rulers of the provinces, and the army which followed them. They killed each his man, and the Arameans fled, and Israel pursued them. And Ben-hadad, king of Aram, escaped on a horse with horsemen. The king of Israel went out and struck the horses and chariots, and killed the Arameans with a great slaughter. Then the prophet came near to the king of Israel and said to him, Go, strengthen yourself, and observe and see what you have to do, for at the turn of the year the king of Aram will come up against you. Now the servants of the king of Aram said to him, Their gods are gods of the mountains, therefore they were stronger than we, but rather let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they. Do this thing, remove the kings, each from his place, and put captains in their place, and muster an army like the army that you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. Then we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they. And he listened to their voice and did so. Okay, so we're looking here at Ahab. We spent time last week looking at him as well. And here we are looking at war between Samaria, the northern kingdom, and the kingdom of Aram, which is roughly analogous to Syria, the country of Syria today. So the intro paragraph, part of the job of an ancient king was to lead his men in battle in times of war. Let's see how wicked King Ahab fulfilled this role. Aram, called Syria in some translations, was a large and powerful kingdom north and east of Israel. It occupied much of today what is the country of Syria, from the Mount Lebanon range in the west to the boundaries of Mesopotamia in the east. A number of smaller sub-kingdoms made up this territory, thus the 32 kings in verse 1. Ben-hadad was a king who was bribed by King Asa of Judah to attack the northern kingdom. Question number 1. Who surrounded Samaria, the capital of Israel, with an army? Ben-hadad, king of Aram. By the way, this was probably a title akin to Pharaoh rather than a name. Number 2, what sort of an army and support did he have? He had his army, and there were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots. The author later notes that the enemy army filled the country. So, by the way, the notation of horses and chariots is standard, but it's also an indicator that this was a very powerful modern army. So, an army that doesn't have horses and chariots would be an army that is limited in its capacity. In the ancient Middle East, to have chariots was something akin to having a main battle tank today. So a Leopard or an Abrams A1-2 kind of a tank, that would be a chariot in its effect, not the way it was used, but in its effect in the ancient world. Number 3, what demand did he make of King Ahab? Your silver and your gold are mine. Your most beautiful or best wives and children are also mine. And again, this is what kings did back then. You go up to another king and you say, I'm bigger, stronger than you, and I'm taking your family, I'm taking your wives and your kids, and bring out the silver and gold in cartloads and we'll load it up. And the implied threat is, if you don't do that, then I'm going to reduce your city to rubble, and I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill all your people. So that's the implied threat. Ahab hears this. Question number 4, how did King Ahab respond to this? I am yours and all that I have. So he says, okay. Again, implied is Ahab is not a dummy. He can look out his window and he can see an army, 20 times bigger than his. And he can see, if I try to resist, we're all dead. And so it's just logical to say, okay, it's better off to lose people, lose wealth, lose status. It's better to lose all that and be alive than it is to just be dead. So that's his calculation. Number 5, why would he say this? Well, there's no hope of deliverance. Humanly speaking, there's no way. There's no way that we find the numbers a little bit later on. He has an army of about 7,000. And another number that's going to show up later on in the narrative is the Arameans have 100,000. Well, there's no contest. It's just not going to work. And so that's why he said, I'm yours, all that I have. Number 6, what else did King Ben-hadad demand? Whatever is pleasing or desirable in your eyes, in your house and the houses of your servants. So, this is humiliating. It is, a real twisting of the knife. It's saying, okay, you agreed, that you were smart to agree, so here's the next condition for letting you live. I'm going to send my staff, and you walk around, and anytime you pause and look at something or somebody, and my staff sees that you like it, I'm going to take it. So anything that you like, anything that's of value to you. Now, I can't decide if this is like legit or if it's actually Ben-hadad just wants a fight. He just he's spoiling for a war, and Ahab agreed readily to the first condition, and now so he's going to push a little further, saying, well, maybe I can get him to fight me. Because Ben-hadad is so supremely arrogant and confident in his army, in his leadership, and the capabilities that he and his men have. He is so arrogant, he cannot conceive that Ahab and the Jews would be able to resist him. So I think maybe he's pushing he's looking for an excuse to start a fight. So, number 7, did King Ahab submit to this? No, he called his counselors in, he talked to people, he said, what do you think? I was going to agree to the first one, but this seems a little over the top. And they all said, no, that's inappropriate. The first condition, we get it, he's a big guy, he's got a big army, he's from a big country, but this is not right. So they all encouraged him, don't agree to it. So he said, no, I'm not going to do that. So now Ben-hadad has his excuse. He has a cause for war. So number 8, did King Ben-hadad find this acceptable? No. He swore an oath to the false gods to destroy Samaria. And this is, of course, where he says, when we knock down your walls and houses and warehouses, and when we knock down your city, all the guys who are following me, there won't be enough dust for every single soldier in my army to pick up a dust from the ruins of Samaria, because there's so many of us, and implied, you are such a rinky-dink city. You are so small and so tiny, and we're so big. Who do you think you are? So, in number 9, what kind of a statement did Ahab make? Let not him who straps on or girds on his armor boast like him who takes it off. In other words, the battle hasn't started yet, and you're acting as if you've gotten to the end of the day and you've been victorious, and so you're taking all your armor off and you're saying, wow, that was a great battle, sure, I'm glad we won. And Ahab says, don't talk like that, because don't count your chickens before they hatch. Now, in many ways, it is a very empty threat, because Ahab doesn't have a big army. Samaria is a pretty small city. And so, in many ways, this is just words. But now something is going to happen. So, in number 10, how would you describe Ben-hadad's attitude? Arrogant, confident, boastful. Number 11, just then God sent a messenger, and what did he say? Have you seen all this great multitude? Behold, I will hand them or deliver them into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord. And remember again that when we see the Lord, Lord, all caps, that's actually the name of God, Yahweh or Jehovah. And so God, through a prophet, says to Ahab, you look out your window and you see that army spread out there, I'm going to hand them all over to you. And at the end of today, you will acknowledge, you will know that I am Yahweh. I am the God of the Bible. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I am Lord. And so that's what the prophet says to Ahab. And he goes on to explain how this is going to work. Number 12, what unusual group was to lead the charge? The young men, servants of the rulers of the provinces. So, in an army like this would be true in the ancient days and all the way up through the Middle Ages and even into the Civil War here in our own country. You would have a couple kinds of soldiers. You would have professional soldiers. You would have men who had trained, who may be battle-hardened, who had been through warfare previously. And then you would have rulers like kings and princes who weren't necessarily great at warfare, but they insisted on, kind of leading the charge because they're glorious and they want the glamour of leading men in battle and so on. But The ones that God says are to lead the charge here aren't either of those. These are the young men. Probably these are servants. These are like serving staff, like chamberlains, guys who help out serving food. And they're not warriors. They're not trained soldiers. So, so God says through the prophet Ahab, these 232 young servants are the vanguard. The vanguard is the front line, the pointy end of the spear. Number 13, I answered it for you, and the answer is no. They were probably not elite warriors. So number 14, how many of them were there? 232. Number 15, why do you think God chose to use these servants to lead the battle?
Because he always chooses the least likely to just confound the
Yeah.
wise men.
So it's a theme through the whole Bible that God uses the weak things, the little things, the numerically inferior things to demonstrate that he's in charge, so that at the end, all the glory goes to him. Nobody can say, well, God picked me because I'm a mighty warrior. No, he picked you because you're not a warrior. And the strength and the power and the results are going to come from God. And this is true through and through the Bible. So, one of my favorite Bible characters is actually Shamgar. He's one of the first judges. Anybody remember Shamgar? So he went out and killed, I think it was 300. Do you remember? 300 or 600 Philistines. And he didn't use like a magic spear. He didn't have like Excalibur, a magic sword. He used an ox goad. What is an ox goad? It's a stick. It's a stick maybe 7 feet long. One end, it might have a bronze blade kind of thing strapped to it, and that's used to scrape the mud off the cow's hoofs. And the other end is just kind of sharpened, use that to poke the rear end of the cow to get it to move. He's a farmer, and he's using a farm implement. But he rescued Israel. And over again. So among the men that the Lord Jesus Christ chose to be his elite corps were fishermen and a tax collector. And these men are going to turn the world upside down. So this is a theme. This is something that runs through the whole Bible. I'm down to number 16. Did Ahab obey the prophet? Yes, he did. He did. He listened, and he said, okay, we'll do it that way. And number 17, how did the battle go? They killed each his man. The Arameans fled, and Israel pursued. King Ahab went out and struck the horses and chariots and killed the Arameans with a great slaughter. The battle does not go like anybody would ever have guessed. Ahab and the northern kingdom army, led by untested young guys, routs. It's an absolute slaughter of the Arameans. And among the more prominent features of that particular statement is the horses and chariots are destroyed. That'd be like, on a battlefield, the armor, the armored personnel carriers, and the howitzers, and the tanks, and you look out, and they're all burning. They're all destroyed. This has happened down through the years, by the way. In World War II, there's a major tank battle in Russia between the Russians and the Germans at a place called Kursk. And it's one of the epic tank battles of all time. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of tanks destroyed on both sides, but especially among the Germans, surprisingly. Another major tank battle was in the 1973 war of all the Arabs against Israel. And on the Golan Heights, the Syrian army had lots and lots of T-72s, and they were running through a valley, and on the crest of the hill, there were a handful, by handful I mean less than 10, Israeli tanks. And as the battle went on, they got successively knocked out. Finally, there's like two operational Israeli tanks against something like 700 Syrian tanks. If the Syrian tanks had made it to the brow of the hill and come over, all of the Galilee would have been open in front of them. They could have gone all the way to Tel Aviv. But that location is called the Vale of Tears. And I believe God supernaturally intervened, and those handful of Israeli tanks held off hundreds and hundreds of Syrian tanks and personnel carriers. In the morning, that whole plain for miles and miles and miles was filled with destroyed Syrian tanks. And I'm guessing that when Ahab went back to his palace and looked out, he saw ruined and destroyed chariots as far as the eye could see. And it's not because Ahab is a brilliant tactician. He actually had nothing to do with this battle, just follow orders. So God is the one who engineered this. Question number 18, what did the prophet Ahab do to, what did the prophet tell Ahab to do after this tremendous victory? Strengthen yourself, that is your military position, for at the turn of the year, springtime, the king of Aram will come up against you. So the prophet warns him and says, this is not over. This was the first chapter, but the king of Aram is going to come back. He's going to come back and he's going to attack you again. So you need to use the time you've got to look around, figure out how you're going to defend your city, your town, your people, do whatever you've got to do to get ready, because this battle's not done yet. So number 19, what excuse did the Arameans use for their defeat? Israel's gods are gods of the mountains. So they got it entirely wrong. Not only is the premise wrong, but they actually use the word God in plural, gods. Now, sadly, some of it is true. What do I mean by that? God. Okay, God certainly is in charge. In the northern kingdom, what kind of religion do they have? Idolatry. They've been worshiping Baal. Remember Ahab, his wife Jezebel? Yeah. So actually part of it is true that the northern kingdom has at least begun, if not carried on with, worshiping false gods. But what they don't appreciate, what they don't understand, is that the real God, the one true and living God, does actually still care about his people. And he is the one who is behind the scenes organizing this. So number 20, this is a trick question in the context. Is Yahweh God of the mountains? Yes, absolutely. He is God of the mountains. But that's not all. We'll get to that momentarily. Number 21, what was their plan for the next battle? Let us fight against them in the plain. Muster an army like the army that you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. So the Arameans say, the reason we lost is because the Jews, their gods, now see, gods in the ancient world are often associated with certain geographical features, the god of the river, the god of the forest, the god of wind, the god of fire, and the gods of the mountains. So this happened in the hill country. The first battle happened in the hill country, so the mountain gods are strong there. But if we draw the Jews out and get them out into the valley, get them out on the plain where it's flat, we have gods, and we have gods of the plains. And we'll beat them, because our gods will overcome their gods on flat ground. That's the logic. That's what's going on here. So number 22, when spring came and the armies were camped against each other, how does the author of Kings describe the scene from verse 27? The Israelites camped before them like two little flocks of goats, but the Arameans filled the country. So it's almost kind of a poetic image, isn't it? You've got two little, all the tents and the command center and all the arms and armor and probably horse paddocks and whatever chariots Ahab had available, and you've got them in two groups, and it's like two little flocks of goats. And then you look across the valley, and it is acre after acre filled with arms and weapons and men and horses and chariots, and you start trying to count. How many are there? I don't know. I just counted 300 tents, and I haven't even begun. And it goes on. It fills the country. The army is huge. So, number 23, a man of God approached King Ahab with another message from Yahweh. What was it? Because the Arameans have said, Yahweh is a God of the mountains, but he is not a God of the valleys. Therefore I will give all this great multitude into your hand, and you shall know that I am Yahweh. So God knows what the Arameans have been thinking and saying, and he sends word to Ahab, and he says, since the Arameans do not understand who I am, I'm going to do this here too. I'm going to take charge of this, and here's how it's going to go. I am going to fight for you. I'm going to arrange it, and the Arameans will understand that their theology is wrong. By the way, this is a great passage to demonstrate that what you think, your theology, has practical effects. The Arameans had wrong theology, and they died. Well, if you have wrong thinking about God, your life is likely to go sideways on you. Well, have right thinking, have right theology, understand who God is, so that your life doesn't go sideways. So here, the next question, number 24, is Yahweh God of the plains and valleys? Yes. Is Yahweh God of the heavens, the sun, moon, and stars? Yes. Is Yahweh God of the seas? Yes. And Job 38 is a great place. He made the oceans, and he set up a boundary and said, you're allowed to go this far, no farther. Also in Job, he talks about some of the creatures he made to inhabit the ocean, like Leviathan, some sort of dinosaur that swam in the ocean. Huge, magnificent. And so Yahweh is God of the plains and of the mountains and of the heavens and of the seas. He is God of all things. There is no other God. He is it. And the Arameans don't understand that. So, number 27, how did this battle go? The Israelites killed of the Arameans 100,000 foot soldiers in one day. One day. 1 day battle, 100,000 casualties. And then, that's not all, number 28, what happened in the city of Aphek, where the rest of the Aramean army had fled? The wall fell on 27,000 Arameans. King Ben-hadad fled into an inner chamber. So the army was at least 127,000. And, they're all dead. They all died. 100,000 on the battlefield and 27,000 when they ran into a city and the wall collapsed. So Ben-hadad is hiding in somebody's wardrobe, He went AWOL, and he's got some staff with him. And number 29, King Ben-hadad's servants who were apparently hiding with him suggested wearing sackcloth, scratchy goat hair cloth, and ropes as signs of humility and submission and surrendering to the merciful King Ahab of Israel. What did Ahab say when he heard Ben-hadad's plea through his humbled servants? Is he still alive? He is my brother. Why do you think Ahab would say that? What is he doing? Well, I can't know completely because the Bible doesn't tell us, but kind of guessing at Ahab based on his actions and character, it's likely something like Aram is a huge country. It's a big, big country. It's an important country. It's a regional power. And if I could buddy up with the king, even though I just defeated him in battle and killed 127,000 of his men, if I could buddy up with him, it'd be like I'm a big player. And I could show myself magnanimous, generous. And I'm a great person. I'm a great king because I humbled the king of Aram and then I let him go. And that may be possibly what's going through Ahab's mind. And so, number 30, what did Ahab do with Ben-hadad? Ahab took him up into the chariot, made a covenant with him, and let him go. Can you think of other times when God had given orders to a Jewish king to completely deal with a pagan group, and then they didn't quite go through with it? All right, yeah, all right. Under Joshua, they didn't quite clean out the Canaanites. That's good. And then King Saul had orders against, let's see, was that the Amorites, I think? And he didn't. He spared the king. And that's when Samuel said, "You have not obeyed the Lord. You didn't do it. God told you what to do, and you did not complete the job." And that's what's going on here too. So Ahab brought him up in the chariot, and he makes a peace treaty with him, and then he lets him go. So now 31, here's a strange story. What was the message from the prophet from God for King Ahab? Because you have let go out of your hand the man whom I, God, had devoted to destruction, therefore your life shall go for his life, and your people for his people. This is a rebuke. This is a major rebuke. The prophet from God is saying to Ahab, you really messed up. You botched it. You ruined it. I gave you a job to do, and you did not follow through. And now your life is forfeit. You're toast. So, there's a lot of lessons. One lesson would be, don't enter into spiritual arrangements with pagans. Don't buddy up to people who are godless and immoral. Don't do that. Another would be, obey God completely. Incomplete obedience, another word for that would be disobedience. And that's where Ahab is. So number 32, how did Ahab respond? He went to his house sullen and furious, or sullen and vexed. What a great description. So he's sullen, he's going to pout, and he's vexed, he's kind of angry, and he's kind of mad. Life is so unfair. Didn't people see that I won a great victory? And, what a lousy attitude, What should he have done? How should he have responded? He should have gotten on his knees and said, God, you're right. I botched it. I ruined it. I recognize I am a fool. I sinned. Please forgive me. And he didn't. So he's sullen and vexed. And that describes a lot of behaviors, a lot of attitudes. And the core of it is because we're not right with God and we refuse to get right with God. Well, that's Ahab. So what lessons have you learned from this chapter of King Ahab's life?
Always obey God.
Always obey God. Just obey God. Don't make life more complicated than it needs to be. Just obey the Lord. What else? So God seems to specialize in using the least likely, the smallest, the least talented to do great things for him. And in fact, remember, this is the lesson that Paul learned in 2 Corinthians 12 when he said, God sent this thorn in my flesh and it was hampering me, and 3 times I asked him, please take it away. And God said to Paul, no, I like you the way you are. This thing that you've got that is kind of debilitating, kind of drags you down, I planned it that way because my strength becomes very obvious in your weakness. Well, it's a principle. What else? Other applications? Take your prayer bulletins, please.